Welcome back to my YouTube channel at Honest Scholars. A lot of times we're in a hurry to submit that work for final assessment. It could be a dissertation or a form of simulation or your draft paper. Whatever academic work it is. Sometimes because we lack time to attend to it as soon as we were given. Or it could also be that we did not even take it seriously. Maybe due to lack of understanding of the scope and the method or the language we're asked to use in the work. And we took it for granted that probably you're going to ask, and at times went on and on and on. We couldn't meet up. And what we do is to do a form of catch-up, and which would not help. The other reason could also be that there's a deadline hanging in other courses, in other modules that you needed to attend to. And that caught up with this, and you had no time to attend to this, and you hurriedly submit what you have, and that could potentially lead you to having your work rejected, or you end up submitting plagiarized work. And that's a lot of embarrassment, a lot of stress for you in it. In this video, I'm going to be showing you 4 red flags that you need to be aware of, you need to avoid. Because if you avoid them, there's a possibility of saving yourself or saving your face from that embarrassment. And if you do that, you have the benefit of having a great work submitted, and you have your rest of mind. What are the red flags that you need to be aware of and avoid? Red flag 1. Grammatical errors. Grammatical errors come in different shapes and forms, and we're going to be talking about the most common ones. We talk about the subject-verb agreement. That's number one thing you must understand, that there must be an agreement between your subject and your verb, such that a singular verb goes with a singular noun, a plural verb goes with a plural noun. If you have the man goes home, the men go home, that's one. And you also have to relate with collective nouns. You have to relate with nouns that are adjuncts, that are not the main noun. You also have to look at the various rules of subject-verb agreement. And if you play by those rules, you're going to have a consistent grammatical usage in your work. The other issue is the sentence structure. And here, I would recommend the Manchester Phrase Bank, which is one of the sources you can use, one of the resources you can use to improve how much of your structure of your sentence you can get, such that when you are contrasting the phrase you're going to use to introduce a contrast is different from the phrase you're going to use to introduce, for example, when you're corroborating or supporting an argument. If you have stated the positive in your preceding sentence, the succeeding sentence, if it is negative, then you have to contrast. So there are so many contrasting words you can use. There are so many what we call transition words or phrases you can use. And if you use them appropriately, you can be sure that you're going to get a lot of consistency, a lot of cohesion, grammatical cohesion in your work. You also have what we call the tenses. So are you using past tense? Are you using present tense? Are you using future tense in your work? Again, depending on the context, probably what is required in the work you're doing, dissertation or thesis or assignment, depending on what you're doing. Sometimes you have to use future tenses. Sometimes you have to use past tenses. This research was. Again, you also have to understand what the requirements are at the institutional level, at the faculty level, at the departmental level, or perhaps it is your supervisor who is giving that instruction as to what to use. What you need is grammatical consistency. You have to be consistent in that regard. So once you are given that instruction, use past tense in your research, or use present if you are using present. Ensure that there is consistency all through. In this research, we examined. A lot of times some professors will prefer, instead of using we, that you should use I. So go with that consistency into your work and let that reflect from the beginning to the end of your work without compromising the grammatical tenses, grammatical structure, and the agreement between your subject and your verb. That thing has to also be the length of your paragraph. When we talk about how you paragraph, you also talk about the length of that paragraph. You shouldn't have too lengthy paragraph. If you have a lengthy paragraph, it might be difficult for your marker to understand. So that's why you have to break your paragraphs into short ones, such that a paragraph of about 6-7 lines could be fine. Then that also reflects in your sentence structure, the fragmentation of your sentences. You don't have too short sentences, you don't have too long sentences. Make your sentences as reasonably short, as reasonably long as possible. You don't want to join too many ideas into one. Ensure that whatever you're saying in a sentence makes a lot of sense, and you can transfer that with a full stop or a semicolon or a colon or a comma, and continue in that line, rather than having too many ideas conflagrated into one. So ensure that there is that splitting of ideas, and when you split those ideas into various aspects, it becomes easy for the reader. It also becomes easy for your assessor to understand the flow of your ideas. That also applies to your paragraphing. In paragraphing, ensure that different ideas are treated in each paragraph. It is either a way of supporting the initial argument you have made, or you are contrasting that argument, but there has to be a new idea in every paragraph you bring in. A new perspective, a new point of view to the idea you have highlighted in your preceding chapter or preceding paragraph, as the case may be. So that's also very important when you're dealing with your paragraphing and grammatical issues in your work. And there are a host of other things you also have to look at, but these are the major ones that you have to concentrate on and ensure that there is consistency in the use of your language. That also takes me to the whole idea of the red flag 2. What is the red flag 2? That is on lack of understanding of the academic environment in which you operate. The environment in which you operate as a scholar, as a student, will determine a lot of things, including the grammatical errors I made mention of, or the grammatical consistency, or the usage of your tenses. All of these things, again, depend on the academic environment in which you're writing, or you're working, or you're schooling. For example, if you are in British academic environment, as different from someone who is in the American academic environment, there are differences. Yes, there are a lot of similarities in how they do the stuff, how things are carried out academically, but there are also differences. Even during your application process, you also notice that there are differences in how you apply to a US university as different from how you apply to a British university. But let's go back to what we're talking about, which is how you deal with your academic work based on the academic environment in which you operate. You have to look at the spelling patterns. What is the spelling pattern in Britain? What is the spelling pattern in America? And what I mean by British and academic environment, I mean that various areas or regions or countries or universities where the kind of English they use is American or is British. So you could be in the university, for example, in Nigeria, and what they use is British English. Somebody else could be in another country where the English they use is American. So depending on, you have to have that understanding of what is the institution, the faculty, the department, or your professor is using. Some will just say, be consistent. If you are British, if you are using British English, be consistent. If you are using American English, just be consistent. Do not mix them together. And that's also a build-up on your grammatical consistency. Ensuring that the spelling that you are using across all your work is the same. If it is British, let it be British. If it's American, let it be American. If you are writing organize, as you see on your screen, organizing in America, it is ORGANIZE. In Britain, it is ORGANISE. So every British school or every school that uses the British English has to adopt that spelling pattern. The way you write date in Britain is different from the way you write date in America. The way you write professional, the abbreviations of professional titles in British schools is different from the way you write it in American schools, and so on and so forth. So you will find all of these things as you see them on your screen here now and relate with them accordingly. Do not mix them together. That's red flag 2. Flag 3 is inconsistency in how you reference. This issue cannot be overemphasized because it has become critical, wherein students mix up American Psychological Association referencing style with modern language association style. So you can't combine MLA with APA in a particular work. It is not done. Again, have an understanding of what your faculty or your institution or your department or your supervisor asks for. When you have that understanding, it becomes very easy for you, because in a lot of schools, what you have to do is to focus on consistency. Regardless of which one you use, they don't mind. But what you have to do is to ensure that there is consistency across board. And if you go back to my previous videos where I've treated MLA and APA referencing style, it becomes pretty easy for you to relate with which one is APA, which one is MLA, or which one is Harvard, which one is Chicago, and a host of other ones. So when you're doing APA referencing style, for example, and which is mostly used in America, especially in various fields like the social sciences, that's what is mostly used. You have to understand how you do in-text citation. You also have to understand how you do the reference list. So you cannot use in-text citation for APA and go to the reference list and say work cited. That's wrong, because work cited is mostly used in MLA. But you use reference list when you are using APA, or references when you are using APL, depending. So when you use in-text citation, go back to those previous videos. It's self-explanatory. You can understand how to use APA referencing style and how you can use MLA referencing style. The other thing I want to add, you must avoid, is to include new items or new sources in your reference list that has not been used in the in-text. So every source, every resource, every material that you use in the in-text must reflect in the reference list or the work cited, depending on whether you are using MLA or APA. There are no new items that must be introduced, no new sources must be introduced under your reference list or work cited. Ensure that only and only those sources and resources and materials that you have consulted during the process of your work reflect in the reference list. Because what we'll see a lot of times is that students will go and copy bibliographies from different work, put it as reference list, and when you go to the body of their work, all of those references are never there. That's a red signal. That is a red flag that you must ensure that no new items are generated and all the items in the in-text must reflect in the reference list. Fourth red flag I'll be discussing with you is the improper structuring of your work. Let's face it, structure is everything. Because there is nothing you build on a weak structure that would stand. So you want to ensure that the foundation is strong, is able to withstand everything and be durable enough to ensure that whatever you put on it does not collapse. And that analogy applies to your assignment. And I'm going to be using an assignment as an example here, not a thesis or your dissertation. If you are working as a student, you're writing an assignment, there is a conclusion, there is an introduction. Those two are a given. So you don't want to skip either of the two, and you cannot do that. So there must be an introduction, there must be a conclusion. In between, you have structure. So one of the things you have to do at your introduction is to let your reader know exactly what you are about. And most times you want to tell your reader the background from which you are coming from. You want to tell your reader what has been done before. You also want to tell your reader or your supervisor what you want to do and what theory or philosophy you want to use to explain and the reason why you want to use those theories. And that is why the how and the why are very important at the introductory level. You must explain how or why you want to do that topic which you have taken. For example, let's take the influence of poverty in the global north over immigration laws in the global south. And let's take Italy, for example, the Italian law on immigration, and now migration from global north, say Ghana, influences the immigration law in Italy. So you want to explain what has been done on that study in the past and why you have chosen that topic or that particular, why you are interested in that, which is your why. And the how has to do with how do you want to do it, the method. So you have to apply theories. There is no way you want to explain such a concept without coming up with theories. You must explain the philosophies that guide your interest in that topic and the kind of argument you're building. So that comes with having a very good thesis statement. If your thesis statement is good, then you back it up with arguments, with theories, existing philosophies, and probably while existing philosophies or existing arguments are weak or are strong, or what are the lapses, what are the gap in the existing argument or existing literature. And that is why you have to build that introductory level, make it as short as possible. And that's why you have to have an abstract. If you have a short abstract about 250, 300 words, depending on what is requested of you, then you move to your introduction where you explain all of these things and you expose a lot of things. Then you go to your literature review. And that literature review, you are explaining what has been done and not just what has been done. So, areas where all of those existing arguments, existing propositions are lacking. So when you expose that, a lot of theories will also need to corroborate. And that is why they said that literature review is not so much about describing. It has to be with critique as well as analyzing. You have to analyze, you also have to critique existing position. So it is not just to be describing, though, author A says this, author B says this, author C says this, author D says this. No, you have to be critical, you have to analyze, and that's why the analytical power is very important. So when you leave that part, you also want to do subheadings under your literature review. Do a little bit of subheadings, depending on the length of work you're doing. If you're doing like 1,300 page work, 1300 word work, you want to ensure that you do your analysis, you do your structuring in such a way that the length of your introduction is not double the length of your literature review. The length of the literature review is not double or triple the length of your conclusion. Let that be balanced. The first thing you want to do is to do word analysis. So allocate words to each section. And this is what a lot of times your technology can do for you. But you don't have to rely on the technology, because again, you still have the liberty to say, look, I want my introduction to be 500 words. My literature review to be 700 words, which is fair. The distribution is fair. Then you want your other parts to be probably another 700 words. Then your conclusion maybe around 300, 350 words. That's fair enough. That's fair sharing. But if you concentrate so many words on one part and leave the other part lame, there is a possibility that your work is not properly structured. So ensure that structure is there, build that structure, and ensure that you follow all the items you have highlighted in your introduction. And your conclusion should just be about doing a summary of what you have said and not bringing in new ideas or proving new theories or bringing up new thesis statements or new arguments. Let your conclusion be about doing a summary, summarizing everything you've said, and maybe making some recommendations at the end of the day. And that's how far we'll go about this video. I hope you find it very helpful. I wish you can turn on the subscribe button and press it. The notification button should be on. The next time I drop the next video, you'll be the first person to listen to it and to see it. See you next time.